Moment. I think always takes a little bit of time, but I am Drew Badger, the founder of EnglishAnyone.com and the English Fluency Guide. Welcome to another live video here on YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing with our previews of the book. We're going to move into chapter 6 today. I've been working on this one for a while. It's been, for me, actually a quite complicated thing. The final chapter, when people read it, I think you will think it flows very well, hopefully anyway. But people have said only good things about the first 5 chapters, so I've been very excited about that. And I wanted to talk about this as a preview because I know people are waiting for the chapter to come out. But I want to thank everybody who's already purchased the book and all the readers that we do have for the kind of early pre-launch of this. If you are not already a member and you're not already reading the book, you can click on the link in the description below this video to get that. But as for today, we're going to talk about the second half of the system because it's actually quite simple. The first one is in chapter 5, where we talk about how to speak correctly. And this is really focusing on the pieces of the language like vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation. But today we're going to talk about how to sound natural and appropriate. So this is a common thing that I wanted and that I know a lot of other learners want too for speaking English. All right, let's take a look quickly at chapters, see how, or excuse me, I'm like thinking about chapters at comments. See, look at that, nice and early, actually very fast as usual. Gina, nice to see you there from Miami. Great to be live. Yes, Rupert, nice to see you there. Or Carl. Carl, which is your first name? Is it second or the first one? Let me know. And Y Fun or Fun, let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Good morning over there. Jose says good morning, and an awful hello from Morocco. All right, let's get into this. This shouldn't be that long of a video because the idea is actually quite simple. I go into much more detail about it in the book, but hopefully this core idea about why this idea makes sense for... Oh, Carl is my first name. Got you. All right. But this idea, I think, should make a lot of sense for people, especially if you've only been, or mostly been, learning English the traditional way. So let's begin. We're just going back very quickly to chapter 5 because both of these chapters are attached. These are the basically 2 parts of the system and really what you need in order to become fluent using the certainty first method that I discovered. And so this is when we're thinking about trying to really understand the language. Typically, when people are learning a language, they begin by focusing on specific pieces of it. So we've got, like, we'll just say vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation. So things like that, when people are first learning a language, typically, even as adults, you might have something you want to say, and then you think about it, maybe translate it, try to find the right words, or maybe you think like some of the vocabulary you already have, you're able to combine it in new ways and produce speech, or maybe you've just heard something and you're repeating something like from a TV show or something you read in a book or a movie or whatever, but that's basically how people are speaking. And so the problem that I experienced and that a lot of other learners experience as well is that even if you're correct, you might often sound unnatural. And this means like let's say, what's a good example of this? So I was talking with, who was I talking with? Here, I'll give you an example from yesterday that I saw that I thought was just like a very interesting thing. So something kind of odd happened. There's just some like, I don't know, crazy news about something. I don't even remember what the story was about, but someone said, who had, I don't know, let's just say, what's a good way to express it? Because this is a little bit different than it's just like a particular story. I just don't remember what the story was about exactly. But let's just say it's talking about ninjas attacking a city, just because I'm in Japan. So there's like a group of ninjas coming, and there was a news report about it, and it was big news. And someone said, "Who had ninjas on their bingo card?" Now, this is an interesting kind of thing that, like, we're in a sense working backwards from how a native might express something like this, and there are many ways that you could express a particular idea, but the situation, the context here is ninjas are attacking a city. So we have, it's like, imagine this is a video game or something. This did not really happen, at least not recently. At least I don't think so. And so you got ninjas, attacking a city, something like that. They're climbing up on buildings and causing trouble. It's now in the news, and someone asks, who had ninjas on their bingo card? Now, what do you think that means? I'll give you a moment to think about that if you've never heard this expression before. But this is a very native way of saying, like who thought who thought ninjas would be attacking the city. Like, that's such an unexpected thing that nobody would have planned for that or thought something like that would happen. So who had ninjas on their bingo card? Just to break this sentence down here, this idea, and this is a very common thing that you could say, like, who had whatever on their bingo card. So you're kind of asking people, a bingo card is from the game bingo. Usually you've got like 5 spaces here, same thing in the middle, and this is the free space. And on each space you have a different, typically it's a number, something like that. You probably know the game bingo, it's pretty simple. But you would have like 2 and 6 and 41 or whatever, and each person has a unique card. And sometimes these games are played with, pictures of stuff for holidays or alphabet letters or whatever. You could play the game with whatever you like. And then the point is, if the person who's leading the game calls out a number or something like that, like number 6, and then you get the free space, everyone gets the free space. But if you get all 5 in a row, you get bingo. And then that means you win a prize or whatever. So that's the idea. This is the context of this phrase, but it can be used in a variety of situations. And so a non-native hearing something like this would probably just think, like, what is going on? I don't understand anything about this. And so who had ninjas, like, as in, of all the different events or things that you might guess from something happening in the world or something happening in the news, who would guess ninjas? And this isn't necessarily like a slang. It's more like a natural expression that natives would use that's kind of over and above what people would commonly say in a textbook or that you might find in a classroom. And so this is, again, it's something that, like, the kind of natural English that you hear often in movies and TV shows, you don't necessarily need to know all of that for you to be able to communicate, but it is really helpful to understand those things when others are speaking. So you might maybe not think to say something like this because it's just not a very common expression. But if you hear lots of movies and TV shows or see this on the news or whatever, you might hear someone talking about that. Now, the reason a native would use something like that is because it's a more creative and interesting way of expressing the same thing. And it's like kind of a visual idea, like, who had ninjas? Who had ninjas? Or even you can expand this, who had ninjas attacking New York on their bingo card? All right, so you can just use this with, native speakers. They typically understand, like, who had XYZ on their bingo card. All right, so this is an example of something where, like, a non-native might see something like this, or they say, wow, like, who like who did you think, or who would have expected like that would happen, or who would have expected ninjas to attack New York City? So it would be, again, a correct expression, but there's this extra level of when you're exposed to native English and you start learning more in like the way I describe in the book. And you might even be doing this already. If you're watching movies and TV shows, you probably hear expressions like this or idiomatic phrases or whatever, and maybe you don't feel so comfortable using it yourself, but you're starting to hear that, or you have already been hearing that for a while. So anyway, again, the difference here where we're talking in chapter 5 about how to speak correctly, I go into lots of detail in that chapter about how do we actually get to produce, smooth flowing sentences. Even if you don't sound like a native yet, that's okay. The point is really just to keep conversations moving and to be correct. And the way I describe this in the book, I talk about the key being developing magnetic vocabulary, and I go into lots of detail about how that works. So the point here is you can sound correct, and that's fine, but many learners want to get to the point where they actually can use expressions like this, because it changes the dynamic when you're in a real situation with someone and you're able to say some interesting idiomatic thing, and the way they view you changes. And they think, oh, like this person actually knows the real language, almost like they know the code or the password to get into a club or something like that. So this is the kind of like native or insider expression that you would hear from natives when they're speaking to each other, because language is not just about describing things. It's also about making a connection with other people and showing that you two know the same things, or you have similar history or something like that. So you're making this deeper connection where you're able to express more interesting things. So again, there's nothing wrong with being correct. Again, the idea is correct. It's fine. But a lot of people want to still be able to understand natives and then also be able to express those same things themselves. All right? So that's the idea, and this is just like something I saw yesterday. I don't remember what the news story was about, but the basic idea is like, who had, giant spiders on their bingo card? Like who would have expected, like who thought, something crazy like this would have happened. All right, so who had such and such on their on their bingo card. All right, and so when you get into an example like this, if you spend a little bit more time looking at it, like I'm doing with you now, it's a lot easier to understand what it means. And of course, if you continue to get more examples, then you will really enjoy like recognizing it when you see it, and you will feel more confident using it yourself. All right, so let's talk about how we actually do this in chapter 6. But first, let me just quickly check comments, see if I missed anybody here. I had all kinds of things on my bingo card here. So hello, my great teacher. Yes, we got the Korean there. Please tell me your name again. Use your name in English so I can read it. I think it's like, I don't know. I don't want to say like the wrong thing now, but Danilo, hi all, and it's back from the last 2 months. And let's see, but here says, idiomatic expressions are so hard to guess unless you get it from a native speaker. You would probably never get it right. Yes, and it's a tricky thing, but in the book I show how it's actually possible to do this. So that's what we're going to talk about right now, in the way that people are learning. And so this is how you can pick up lots of good idiomatic expressions like this. Even if you don't use them, you will understand a lot more when natives are using these things. Rolla says, hello, Drew, long time. Where have you been? Well, I was, working on the book, basically. So I've been releasing these latest YouTube videos as I'm releasing chapters of the book. And so this video is about chapter 6, which shall be coming out very soon. As soon as I'm very happy with it. I've been going over it and back over it and making sure everything is correct. But today is also a good day for me to check something where just making sure people understand the idea. because this was a real revelation for me when I was figuring this out. So that's where I've been. And let's see, Learn and Grow says, where are you from? I'm from the United States, Chicago, but I now live in Nagasaki, Japan. So Tuck says, when you think of non-physical words, do you get definition of that, then lots of examples, or do you eliminate the doubts by getting examples? Which way is better? Well, it kind of depends on where you hear the word or where you get it. So you could, and we'll actually talk about that in this video, talking about the kind of directional learning that comes when you're learning from situations. So we'll talk about that. Let's see right now. And Anis is also saying, can I get the book? Yes, you can click on the link in the description. If you'd like to get the book, you can join the early readers list. This is where I'm making the book available for people who would basically like to help me finish writing it. So they get to see the early chapters and see how it works before I release the finished book. And I thought this would be a really good way to help people faster, but also to build the book with people, to make sure I'm not missing things or skipping over any important information people would like to know more about. But so far, it's been really good. Lots of people are sending me positive feedback about the book, and they've been excited about it. So again, if you'd like to get the book, you can click on the link in the description below this video to get it. Learn and Grow says, how long have you been teaching? How long? Teaching English, I guess, over 20 years now. So helping people learn, specifically focusing on confidence and fluency. But yeah, and I enjoy teaching, and this is kind of a problem I've wanted to solve for a while, because I'm also a language learner myself, learning Japanese. And so I've actually spent more time trying to help other people understand how to get fluent than me learning Japanese. So I should be spending more time. Every time I think like, I should focus on some more, learning Japanese right now, I think I need to finish the book. So anyway, that's what I'm working on right now. And though I would like to speak even more languages, my thinking is if I can make this system available for everybody to learn, then they can use it to learn whatever they want. And then it doesn't really matter what the language is, because the way I'm talking about, it works especially well for English because I know lots of examples are available. I don't really know about learning, Lithuanian or whatever, like how many specific examples might be available for that. Maybe a lot, I just don't know. Let's see. All right. So, that's right. Haney, that's right. Okay, I remember your name now. Nicole Brazil here. Good evening, Learn and Grow. Can you teach Japanese as well? I could teach Japanese, but not. I don't know why anyone would want to learn Japanese from me. I might sometimes teach my own children some, but I'm not like a Japanese teacher. Ho-An says, what do you think voice placement in speaking? What do you mean by that? Is that a specific thing, voice placement? Gina, so whenever you release a new chapter, whoever bought the book can be upgraded version by clicking on the link. Well, if you already have the book, you'll just log in and download the new version of the book with the updated chapters in it. So everybody who has the book automatically gets all the new versions. You will get the audio book version when that's done later. But right now, this is just finishing the core book. But yes, anybody who is reading it and enjoying it will be just automatically getting the new chapters as they're released. Carl says, I read chapter 5 and I felt that what was missing were breakdown of example sentences, possibly kindly add them in chapter 6. Carl, let me know what specifically you mean, like more example sentences of what? Like you want me to break down and the reason I don't spend a lot of time breaking down sentences in English in the book, like it's a phrase book or something, is because the book is more about helping people understand the principles of where things come from, because it's really easy to get those examples from Google or ChatGPT or whatever. The learning part is actually quite easy to do once you get the examples. But if I spent more time looking at example sentences, like how I don't know, like, I mean, you can let me know what you think about, I don't know, specific examples you might want in the book, but you can really create whatever examples you want anytime you want with things like ChatGPT. So that makes it's kind of useful, I guess, to understand a few examples of particular grammar points or something if I were trying to do that. But again, the purpose of the book is not really just to give you a bunch of examples and really teach you the language. It's just to help you understand how language learning works. But you can let me know if there are specific things you think I'm missing. Let's see. Hassan says, your guiding method is evergreen. There you go. That's another good expression right there. Glad to hear it. Berger says, I don't understand, but I'm here. Welcome. Learn and grow again. Sir, have you ever been to India? No. I think the closest I've been to India is, where have I been? Been to Thailand, I guess. It's obviously not India, but the closest I've been, I guess, would be Thailand. And C says, I'm still imagining what kind of conversations when I can say, who bad ninja, or who had ninja on their bingo card. So again, like this expression is really for any time, like let's say something happens that's really surprising to you, like a mailman bites a dog instead of a dog biting a mailman. And like that would be a surprising thing. Like, wow, like who thought, like let's say some war starts and it's an unexpected thing for most people. Maybe some people know it's coming, but some people are, like the majority of people probably don't. But let's say you hear some news like that and you think, oh, wow, that's a surprising thing. I did not expect that. Like, so instead of saying I did not expect that, like who had, whatever on their bingo card. Or another way you might express this is like, I did not have such and such on my bingo card. So if you're saying that to other people, or you can even just be thinking it to yourself as a kind of way of practicing it, reviewing it, but wow, like who had something on their bingo card? Who had something on their bingo card? All right, so I can ask like someone else, like, did you have something? Like, did you have ninjas on your bingo card? And you can even be more specific, like, did you have ninjas attacking New York on your bingo card for, I don't know, this month or whatever, for November or for July or whatever. So there are lots of ways you can express it, and this is another thing actually we talk about in the book, how you don't need to memorize a particular way of saying something because there are lots of ways of saying it, but the deeper, more important point, the distinction in the book is we're talking about what's correct in chapter 5 and then what's natural in chapter 6. And this is where you will see like much more interesting, colorful language, where you can understand things and you feel like, wow, I can actually understand something by the way you learn. All right, so we keep getting comments here. I'm trying. All right, let's see if we get, let's see, Detreklin. I think you guys are speaking to each other. Learn and grow. You're most welcome in India. Lots of love for you. Well, glad to hear it. Manola is back. I'm here just to mesmerizing your beauty. So if you want to express it that way, you would say like just to be mesmerized by your beauty. But look at Manola, very kind over there. And Samundra, I suggest you make a playlist with complete lesson. If you're talking about the book, I may do that later. But yeah, again, this isn't. It's not really like the best explanation of like how the book works, because I go into way more detail in the actual book. Like I'm going to talk about things briefly here just so you understand the big picture, but the people who would like to know more like in detail about how this works, that's what we talk about specifically in the book. So if I may make a different video series or something talking about the book, I may do that later. We'll see. And Hassan says, sir, why every time I try to think in English, my brain try to translate everything first? Well, it's just a habit for most people. So if you're thinking about things in English, it's better to train that by focusing on more basic things first. It is another thing I talk about in the book in chapter 5, where we're really trying to focus on understanding specific words and phrases by getting lots of good examples of them. And you can start smaller. Often people will translate in their head because they start with a bigger or longer or more complicated idea and then try to say that. But if you think like, here we're going to just draw, here's a black tree. Black tree. So I don't have to translate anything in my head because this is a quite simple thing. And so you can work up from there by just talking about or getting examples of very simple things and seeing where you start to translate. And the point where you start translating means you don't really know the vocabulary very, very well yet. So you're essentially uncertain about that particular part. So I would find more basic things because people typically will translate some things and not translate others. So think about some more basic things that you might want to say and then focus on those. So that will, again, develop the habit of you not needing to translate in your head every time you speak. Let's see. Lauren Gross says, could you tell about the difference about the causative kind of sentence in English? Just Google that or do, you can search right on YouTube for examples of that. People are already making lots of videos about specific grammar points like that. Anyway, let's get into Chapter 6 and the main idea. All right. So as I mentioned, here actually we'll just put Chapter 5 back up there again. So Chapter 5 is talking about the pieces of English. And we can represent this like, let's say we've got, we'll put grammar and vocab, pronunciation. And there are quite a few more things like this. These are really the main ones people talk about learning. Like you can fit other things into this as well, but typically these are the main things people are studying. And obviously these are connected to each other when you speak. And over here, so these we'll just call these the pieces. I'll write that better for you. The pieces. Wait a minute. What did I? Yeah, that's weird. All right, so these are the pieces over here. And then over here we have situation. Now, I've talked quite a bit about this on the channel, but I'm glad to really go into detail in the book about this because once you see what's happening directionally, and I'm kind of making up that word, like moving in a particular direction with how you learn, it becomes a lot easier to become fluent. And so we begin with the pieces over here. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, people are typically beginning, like we just got a question a moment ago, can you teach me the causative tense or whatever? You know, somebody will begin with a particular grammar point, or they have a particular word or something like, how do you say this or whatever, or how do you pronounce a particular word? So these are the most common questions you get as a teacher, just like you see I'm getting here in the chat for this video. And every video is the same way. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. This is a common thing. Natives do this as well. And I make this point in Chapter 6 where we do want to obviously learn things like this, and it's important to do that. Natives do that. Natives often ask questions about these same kinds of things, like how do you pronounce something, or what does this word mean, especially if they hear some new vocabulary in some situation, or they're trying to understand how grammar works, especially children. But what's actually happening is that the goal of language learning typically is to teach you the pieces of things so that you can be prepared for what happens in a real conversation. That's the goal. Although most language learning is more focused on test prep than actual communication, so we'll kind of ignore that for now. But in general, this is more directionally what's happening. So imagine we've got a situation over here like ninjas attacking a city. So we got our ninjas attacking a city over here, the buildings, and we've got the ninjas up here. You know, this is a bad picture, but So this is the situation over here, and you might describe this with particular vocabulary or grammar, or have words pronounced in particular ways. But again, the basic idea is that, like we have this example here in the chat of give me the causative tense, we're beginning with something and then thinking about kind of moving directionally from here to this piece to thinking about how that would fit in the real world. All right. And the reason I call these things pieces, it's like another thing I talk about in the book, how good language learning is often like solving a puzzle. It should be, where you get enough pieces that you can make that last movement or connection or something that allows you to understand something on your own. It's almost like, I'll give you the example of an arch. So when people are building like a bridge like this, you might start with, blocks going up here. Often there'll be some kind of piece under here. You put the blocks on top of this to make sure you can build the actual shape of the arch. But here we put like the keystone or the cornerstone in here. When you drop that brick in here, or this block, you can remove this part under here. And this part allows the bridge to hold because the pressure is kind of going from here and then it's moving downward on the sides of the bridge like that. And that's what allows the bridge to stay up. And in the same way, when people are learning, the goal of a good teacher is really to provide you with all of these pieces over here so that you can drop in that last piece. All right. So that's what's happening. And typically you get these pieces, but you can think about them as almost like different kind of puzzle pieces. So you've got grammar puzzle pieces or vocabulary puzzle pieces, pronunciation puzzle pieces, and the situation itself is actually the whole puzzle. So here we see like something is happening, ninjas are attacking a city or whatever, and that's the whole puzzle piece. I'm going to draw this badly, but imagine like a kind of, regular, I'll draw one piece here for you, kind of a typical thing like that. Like this is a jigsaw puzzle piece. So a jigsaw is a kind of saw that can cut in little shapes like that. A jigsaw puzzle. So this is a puzzle piece. And when you go from the pieces over here to the situation, there's an obvious problem. And that's that you can maybe fill in some of this. Like I might learn a particular grammar point like the causative or whatever, and then I'm filling in something for the situation, but I can be correct about the grammar and still unnatural because I'm missing all these other pieces over here. So what usually happens is people will focus on a particular thing and they will understand that, but when they try to apply it in a situation, they're still missing other things like the vocabulary or the pronunciation or the rhythm or the tone or other things like that. Because when you have all of these things together in a situation, there's much more than just these pieces. Okay? We say the whole, so the whole. So the complete picture is greater than the sum. Make sure that fits in there. The sum. So the sum meaning like the total, like the amount of everything put together. So the sum of the parts. So in a conversation is more, even if you learn vocabulary, even if you learn pronunciation, if you don't actually prepare for the situation itself, then it's going to be more difficult. And most people, again, are just picking like one or two things. Like they learn some words, and then when they get to the situation, they still sound unnatural, even if they sound correct. So I could say something that is correct in a situation, but maybe the tone is incorrect or the pronunciation is not good or whatever. It could be lots of different reasons for that. But this is, again, the difficulty with going from the pieces of a language to trying to fit all of those into the actual full puzzle. All right. So not only do you need all the pieces, but the whole is also greater than the sum of the parts. And that means that even with all the grammar, all the vocabulary, all the pronunciation, there's still a lot more that's contained in the situation that you might not notice if you just began over here. Okay? So in chapter 5, this is what we're doing. And it's not a bad thing. It's, again, something natives will commonly do. And just like we're seeing here, and people will probably ask me even more questions about what does that word mean, or what is that grammar point, or what is this pronunciation? How do you say a particular word? All of that is fine. But to add to that, we want to go now in the opposite direction. And this is what we talk about in chapter 6. So chapter 6 is really taking this and reversing it. So when we begin with a situation, we actually see all the pieces of it. So we actually can see what's happening. Ninjas are attacking a city, and maybe we hear a native describing that. So we get to hear the tone. Maybe they're really excited. Maybe they're on the news, or whatever the situation is. But when you begin with the situation itself, like actually hearing someone describe it, or you are feeling in that moment and listening to other people talk, that actually gives you all of these pieces at the same time. So instead of beginning with a grammar point like, teacher, please teach me the causative tense or whatever, that would really, you would learn this thing and you would have one arrow moving this way, and then I would still have to add other things to that. But if we begin with a situation where something is happening, like it could even be focusing on a particular grammar point or vocabulary or whatever, but then it's moving back to the left and giving you all of these things at the same time. Okay? Now, once I saw this, I was just thinking, okay, this makes a lot of sense, but I'm kind of doing this already. I'm watching movies and TV shows or whatever, but that's not really helping me very much. And so when I finally made the connection that number one, I need to move from the right to the left. So I need to obviously continue doing this, moving from the left to the right is a good idea. And again, natives do this all the time, but I needed to start doing this more, but actually doing it systematically. That was the thing that stopped me from learning. So when I'm in this kind of traditional learning mode here, where I'm focusing on a particular grammar point, one of the ways I describe this in chapter 5 is how I was reading Japanese children's books to learn particular grammar points. And even though it might not be like a full, hearing it example, unless you hear the example maybe from a YouTube video, like somebody reading the book, it's still giving me a really strong understanding of the grammar and how it might be used. So the same thing in English, it's a better idea to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some good children's book examples that help me understand whatever, like the possessive or the progressive tense or, whatever, the past perfect or something like that. So whatever that thing is, instead of me trying to think about that, I'm trying to fit that into situations in a bit more natural way and actually learn how the grammar is used rather than just trying to get a list of rules about how something works. All right, so that's what we're talking about in chapter 5, and that's all good. We will continue to do that. I do that still as I learn Japanese, and natives are doing that at the same time. But to that, we're also going to add now learning from situations. And the key that makes it possible is, again, naturally varied review in the same way that we're using that to learn these pieces. So let's say I want to learn a particular grammar point. I would get a bunch of different children's books that all focus on that same grammar point. And that's not the only way I might do it, but that's just one example that I give in the book about how you can learn from the particular pieces like this, like focusing on something like that, but actually learn it in a natural way rather than just have a teacher tell you that, here's how it works and here's the sentence structure for things like that. it's a really difficult thing to remember, and you've probably learned a particular tense before, and maybe you don't remember it or can't use it for whatever reason because you've studied it like a computer rather than understood it like a native. And so the book, like the children's book idea, is a way of bringing those situations into that learning. So the naturally varied review, again, helps us make the vocabulary or the grammar or whatever, helps make that magnetic so that we really understand that and we use it correctly without thinking. But to that, we're also going to apply learning from situations, and that's what helps us to get to that native, natural level to learn how to say what's appropriate. Because again, I might know certain vocabulary and then I'm going towards the situation in this way where, okay, here's something I know and I can say it in this situation, but natives might say it differently. They might pronounce it differently. They might have a whole wide range of different phrases they might use. And if I begin with how a native says something for a situation, then I will actually learn how to express that the same way a native does. All right? So we've got looking at the different examples of things. Again, this is correct. I want to remind you this is a perfectly fine way to learn that natives also do. But the thing we want to add to that is learning from situations, which many people often do already, but they're not doing it very systematically. So I made a video a while back called, what was that video? How to Speak Fluently About Almost Anything, and that's also the name of Chapter 6, where we're talking about like what is the thing that allows natives to speak. And it's learning from situations, but getting that naturally varied review where we don't just see one person talking about something, we see a bunch of different people giving examples of that same thing. And that's how natives develop that ability to say what's correct. So I go into a lot more detail in the book about this, but this is the basic idea. So if you are already doing this, like you're already trying to watch movies and TV shows or whatever, but you don't feel more confident and fluent, it's probably because you're not getting some good naturally varied review. Often people will watch, like let's say, like here's a 2-hour movie. And if you think about within a 2-hour movie, how much information is presented to the learner, it's often an overwhelming thing. And even if you understand it all, you might not feel confident using it because you just aren't getting much review of that. And so a movie like this, if we think about particular situations, there are lots of them happening in a movie. And even within, like think about this video right now, I might be talking about one thing, I'm explaining a situation, like explaining this thing is a particular situation. But even within that, I have different ways of expressing things, or I might focus on a particular part or whatever. So we can get as detailed as we like when I'm giving a speech, how do I begin a speech? What's a typical first thing that people often hear when they start a speech? You might hear something like ladies and gentlemen. So that's like you might see that at the beginning of a show or a speech or something like that. It's just kind of like, a common thing. Like in Japanese, it's like minasan konnichiwa, something like that. So I'm just beginning something in a typical way, but because I've seen lots of examples of that, I know how to start that in the way that a native would typically do that. All right. But as you get more examples of things, you really start to remember your vocabulary well, and you also learn lots of variety. So you get a variety of different ways that you might be able to express something. All right. So I try to work people through this in the book so they can see where they are stuck in their own learning process in the same way I was. So again, learning the pieces is correct. If you're already trying to learn from real content, that's great. Lots of people do that, but the reason it's often slow or difficult for people is they just don't get enough naturally varied review. They don't actually focus on a particular thing, get enough examples of it to really feel confident about it, and then move on to something else. Usually they will watch one movie and then read a different book, and then here's another article over here about something else, and they don't really come back to this information. So sometimes if you get enough input, you will remember things or something you saw in one movie that was in another book, something like that. But you can be much more strategic and improve much faster by actually focusing in this same way, like We're going to pick a situation and then get a bunch of examples of that situation in the same way that I could pick a grammar point and get a bunch of examples of that grammar point. All right, but I want to do this in a natural way and make sure I'm not overwhelmed by too much information. All right. All right, I'll go back and check comments here. You can let me know if you have any questions about any of this, but this is the method when you think about it for chapters 5 and 6. That really is the whole deal, and it's actually a quite simple thing when you think about it, but this is how you can learn a language even faster than a native and actually become a fluent speaker even before you talk with people, because you're understanding the language really well. Even if you don't have someone to practice speaking with, this is how you can prepare for those kinds of things. So you can prepare like specifically for, I know I'm going to talk with people about, I don't know, whatever. I'm going to a baseball game today in Japan, and I don't really know much about baseball, and maybe I should watch some videos of people talking about specific things like that. That's a way of practicing or preparing for a specific situation, and that would teach me a lot of the vocabulary and pronunciation and things like that, or nuances and other things. Again, the situation, so when people are actually describing something or experiencing something, it teaches you a lot more than just this. So I mean, it's more kind of like, working like this. Like if we were to take all these different things that you might be learning, but it's a lot more than just getting that. So when you begin with things like, teacher, tell me how to use a grammar point, that's not a bad question, but it's typically an incomplete one. Or even if you get your answer like, how do you use a grammar point, are you still feeling certain or uncertain about how to actually use that in different situations? And that's really the key. So we want to take this approach going from left to right, and we want to take this approach going from right to left to really understand both of these things. And then make sure we get naturally varied review to get lots of good examples that help us understand things in context. All right. All right, let me go back and check comments. Let me know if you have any questions as I do this. But as I said, this is a pretty short, just a pretty short video. Let's see, how long have we been going for? 40 minutes. But yeah, just another preview of Chapter 6. And it's taken me a while to really distill this. It's a simple idea when you think about it, but I go into actually how it works because I want to explain to people what fluency really is. And that way, when you're thinking about how it actually works, like people will understand, oh, okay, so when you start learning things, there are a couple of interesting, kind of surprising things that happen when you start learning this way. And it's not just the vocabulary or grammar or whatever that you're learning, you're actually learning to understand and communicate the same way a native does, but even before you speak. So even if you don't have someone to practice with, you could live, wherever in the world, and you can learn how to do everything because all of these examples are now freely available. And when you have the examples, the learning is actually very quick and easy because the learning part, it's like this same idea here of this arch. If you have all the pieces assembled, like either you have someone help you do that or you just spend your time collecting these things yourself, getting the aha moments from these things are actually really easy to do. The learning process itself is just a very natural thing. Your brain wants to understand these. It's just often the pieces are, they're spread out, or it's hard to find things you want, or you don't really understand. Like, you hear something like who had ninjas on their bingo card example like I gave earlier in this video, and you're just like, I don't even know where to begin, what that even means. And so it's helpful to have someone actually go through if you want to do this faster. But the point is, it is possible to do this by yourself even if you don't have someone to speak with, so that if you learn this way, you will feel confident and be expressing yourself when you do have people to speak with. Right. Let's see. So C says, where is my #1 crown? And learn and grow. Let's see. Sir, I would actually really want to know what is the natural way of learning a language. Get the book. That's exactly what I'm describing in this video. So what I try to do in the book, and I think I'm successful at it because people have been enjoying the book and telling me they're getting it. the natural way of learning is that typically you get lots of good examples, but often, even for native speakers, people are not doing this very efficiently. So, like a native child, it's kind of like advertising where you walk around Times Square in New York City, if you've ever seen that, and they're just, or like, downtown Tokyo or any large city that has lots of advertising up, so you can see company logos and things like that. It's all just overwhelming you. Everyone's trying to get your attention. And it's the same thing with vocabulary or pronunciation or grammar or whatever, other things like that. So when you're just walking around in the world as a native in a native environment, you will hear lots of language and see lots of language, and a lot of it you just you don't process it, especially for children. And so they might watch a TV show or a movie or something, and the children will be watching just for visually what's happening on the scenes, like the picture is moving around like a cartoon or something. But there's not a lot of dialogue. So the words, maybe they don't understand a lot of that. So over time they will, but that's usually because they're getting lots and lots and lots of input. And so instead of that, like that's a way to get fluent, but it's a very inefficient way to get fluent, because you're just like waiting for the right things to come at some time, and maybe you get a good example, maybe you do not. But a good teacher is actually able to give you those examples very quickly, so you get aha moments, and these are those moments where you actually feel like you understood something, like, okay, now I understand how something works. And you continue to get examples until you really feel confident and certain about using something. So most people are not doing that, and that's why it takes a long time, especially for non-natives, to learn. So native speakers are often taking a much longer time than they could or than is really necessary, and I talk about that in Chapter 5, which is about how to get fluent faster than a native, or at least how to learn faster than a native, and I talk about fluency throughout the book. But the examples of like the kinds of things that people do typically when they're learning, they're really just focusing on this. Maybe they get a few situational examples, or they try to do that like watching a movie, but it's often just too difficult, and it's hard for people to find specific content at their level. So all of those contribute to making it more difficult for a lot of people to learn. But yeah, so that's when you're talking about what is like a natural way of learning, I'm taking the native approach, but making it a much more, or I guess a simpler and more strategic way of getting that same kind of learning. Dran says, dang, I'm late. And Hassan again, when I got to the situation, does that mean ownership, this particular situation, or I need more work? Well, again, like you have a situation and you get an example like a situation is, something happens, I drop something on my head. What do I say? So that is a situation. You're learning the grammar for that particular, or, the word or expression or whatever. What do I say when I'm surprised by something? Or if I meet a friend that I haven't seen in a long time, I'm like, hey, great to see you. It's been so long. So here, like the situation is what's happening, and then there's the vocabulary connected with that. But the point is not to just memorize what happens in a particular situation. The point is really to get good examples of that, because as I also talk about more, actually a lot in detail in Chapter 6, is really what's happening kind of inside, below the surface, as you're getting these examples. So it's not just about knowing a grammar point or vocabulary or knowing those. It's the process of, as you're learning these things, you're actually developing deeper skills about how to talk about things maybe you didn't study. So I can talk about things in Japanese that I don't specifically know the vocabulary for, because I can talk around those issues, or I can use the vocabulary I have. Or I know in one situation there are many different ways I might respond or express myself, and other natives or non-natives will do the same thing. And so what I'm actually doing is, by learning this way and getting this really deep understanding that's it's focused on getting certain about things. As I become certain about them, that leads to deeper connections that allow me to speak. And that's where the fluency actually comes from. So I'm able to, because I know a language, like just like I'm speaking in English right now, I'm combining lots of things that could be expressed in other ways. So I might think, like what I'm expressing right now, I could say it in a different way. Or maybe I might change how I'm saying it depending on who's listening to me. Like I might, say it differently from my daughter versus my mother who knows English really well. So again, the point is not to think about like becoming certain about a situation so much as like, by focusing on that and really coming to understand it, you're developing the habits that allow you to speak, and that also allow you to speak even when you don't know about a particular topic. So now, like I can walk around Japan and it doesn't matter where I am or who I'm speaking with, I can usually find something to say. Like I will figure out a way to use what I know. So it's more like, as I describe in the book, becoming a good chef, where you can take a few ingredients and know how to work with them very well. So I understand how some vocabulary could fit in many different situations. So I don't just learn one thing, I'm learning something that now can be applied in many different ways. Or I'm understanding from a situation how this vocabulary is used here, but maybe that could be used elsewhere. And as I'm doing these things, I'm developing a kind of higher level habit or skill, and that's what allows me to speak. And so if you think about how non-natives or even just native children are speaking a language, when I'm talking with my kids who are now 10 and 6 years old, when I'm talking with them, especially the younger one, she will use whatever vocabulary she has available to express things. And she can express a wide variety of things because she knows the vocabulary well. All right, that's the difference. If you just learn something at a surface level, a superficial level, you don't really understand it very well, and this is typical for people who are just getting translations or definitions of words. If you just learn that way, you will not, like, you're making your job harder for yourself. You're basically learning a little bit, and then you kind of go to another thing and you don't really understand it deeply. But the understanding deeply part is what actually grows the ability to communicate about almost anything. And so that it's like people will sometimes ask me like, okay, here's a particular situation like, like this ninja's example here. Like, how do I learn exactly what to say for the ninja example? And the point is not to try to learn or memorize a bunch of phrases for each individual situation, because it's impossible to do that. And even natives are not doing that. Instead, what you're trying to do is understand the vocabulary really well, so that vocabulary becomes very useful to you. And you can use one word in various ways, or you understand how to speak, like you could respond in various ways in the same situation. So if I'm thinking about something, I want to say this, but oh no, I maybe forgot the word. And this happens to me even in English sometimes. Like I'm trying to think of something and like, I don't remember the name of a particular thing. I just switch to something else. In Speak Like Me, I call this moving like water. I don't mention that specific term in the book, but that's the same basic idea. I'm able to switch from one thing to something else. And I layer these examples, and you see exactly how this works in the book. But this is the foundation of it here. So that's why I wanted to talk about it in this video. All right, let me go through these next couple of here. So Dran says, nice to see you back, Drew. Miss your stream. It's been a while. Yep. So it's I've just been working on the book, and I didn't really have anything to say other than just what I'm working on. So that's why I'm making the video now before the chapter is almost released. Marcia says, hi. Tsubasa says, Adodiu sensei. Ohio. Well, nice to see you there. So Manola says, thanks, Drew. I really believe that listening, you people can be fluent in English. I did, perhaps because your spirit is brighter than the sun. Well, also, let's see, that listening, you people can be fluent in English. Yeah, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying just listen and become fluent, because I mean, even if people tell you to do that, like imagine if you just covered your eyes and only heard information. That would be a really inefficient way to learn because someone describes something to you like, what is a color? If you can't see what that color is, then how is that helping you learn anything? Like someone says, okay, hey, red and blue and yellow, like it's just information to me, but I don't really understand what it means unless I actually see the color. So when people talk about, listen or whatever, the point is not just listening, it's to get certainty as quickly as possible. And you get certainty in whatever is efficient for that way of learning. For example, if I want to know what flavor some food is, it's much better for me to just taste the food. That's how I can get certainty about that rather than me trying to get an explanation from someone else. So that's the basic idea. So just to make sure I'm not misunderstanding you there, but the point is not just to only listen, like you don't get fluent by listening, you get fluent by developing certainty. And there are quite a few ways to do that. So C says, in other words, we have to focus on specific stuff rather than the whole language. Yes. And so this is a kind of inside out way of growing your ability to speak. And people think that if they focus on something, that means they're going to get fluent more slowly. And actually the opposite is true. And that's exactly what I discovered. So I had spent many years trying to learn the traditional way where I would learn as much as I could, but I couldn't use much of it. So what is the point of that? Why know a whole bunch of information if you can't use it? And so again, that's a very easy, obvious contrast with a native, whatever, like a child speaking any language. So they have a smaller vocabulary, but they use it well. They know the words very well, and that's what allows them to speak. So when you focus on things and your ability to focus is really just how much you can understand. So a movie is like a situation, but honestly, there are many, many situations within that movie, and you could focus on individual situations, like just one scene or one expression or something like that. But you can focus on those to become certain about those particular things. Marcia says, I have to go out. I don't understand you things. Well, thanks for stepping by. Tran says, I think the key is to forget how you learn your native language and be a blank slate for English native language. I wish human brains work like a computer in terms of storing new information in case English language, we can just save it in our brains. Yes, well, we don't live in the matrix yet, so we can't just plug a cable into our head and start speaking and learning the language much easier, but we have the next best thing, and that's what this approach is. So it's an alternative to what people typically do when they're trying to learn, which is learn a whole bunch and not really know it very well, and that's what keeps them stuck. And so often these same people think, okay, I still don't know enough words, maybe I need to know even more, and that's when I'll start speaking. But of course, it doesn't work that way because children don't learn that way either. Like, they're obviously learning more as they get older, but they're able to speak well because they know the vocabulary so well. So they understand the pronunciation and the patterns and the rhythms and tones and all of those things. Jelton says, Drew, do you think your ability to listen, or you mean hear British English, since you're American English speaker, is way better than us learners of English, even if I'm an advanced learner? It might depend on the person, but probably. I mean, my British English and American English are not that different. The pronunciation is slightly different, but if you know the patterns, it's pretty easy, especially for like a native speaker of one language or the other to understand. So they might have some phrases like, I don't know, what are they? What's a British phrase? Like a geezer or what, like an old guy or whatever. Like, oh, that's a geezer, or some other local phrases. But that's even the same thing in the United States as well. So we will have different places in the United States that say like soda or pop or Coke or whatever. They will call that drink a different thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I would imagine it would probably it would be pretty rare to find a non-native who could understand British better than I do. But again, I'm not focusing on trying to understand British English. But if you just took some British English speakers and just had me talking with them, I'm sure I would be able to have a good conversation with them just fine. Let's see, and then you continue, because I think that my ability to listen, and again, you would say hear American English. So here, this is again like your comment is a really good example of someone who has a high level of English but still makes basic mistakes, because you're not using, or you're not like getting enough of that review that would help you use the right thing in the right way. And again, like you have a good level excuse me, a good level of English, but you can see like this is a very common thing that a lot of people have, especially intelligent people who know a lot and would like to, be able to talk about more interesting things than the kinds of things that children learn. But what's interesting is that if you focus on mastering the basics and then really making sure you understand things, that's where you actually start speaking well. So let's see, because I think my ability to listen, so you would say listen to, but probably you mean hear, American English is very good. However, my listening in British English movies is not good. I have some difficulties to understand British English movies. Yes. And so again, like I would probably understand an American English movie better than a British one, but it would not be so different, like their pronunciation, I would be able to understand them just fine, but they might use some slang or idioms or something like that. I just don't know, but it's not a problem of me not understanding them. I just don't know what the vocabulary is. All right. Well, look at that. We got through all of the comments, but it's a kind of complex idea, but I am taking my time to make sure that people really understand how the process works, and I go into detail about how fluency is actually developing. And so when I talk about fluency, I mean your ability to talk about things even when you're not prepared, or somebody asks you about something and maybe it's different than what you expected, but you're still able to continue with the conversation, that kind of thing. So this is not about being perfect. It's more about communicating in the same way natives do, where they're thinking about language and trying to fit something that's, the best fit for the situation. And then when you're learning this way, you will naturally feel these same things develop as they were developing for me. But again, that's what I do in Chapter 6. And if you do not have the book already, you can click on the link in the description below this video to get it. But people have been enjoying it very much so far. They've really been understanding why a lot of what they do hasn't helped them. And it's been really good for them to understand now what they should be doing instead. Let's see. So this sentence is very common in UK, a nugget of information. Yeah, we'll use that same thing in American English, a nugget of information. Nervophobic says, hi, your native style method is great, but since IELTS reading is a vocab test with 30 to 40 new words daily, it's a bit slow. Could you suggest a quicker way to build IELTS vocabulary? Again, like, let's see if I can describe this. I talk about this in Chapter 5, actually. If you've not read the book, maybe you don't know about it, or you've not heard me talk about this on videos in general. And I will probably go back in the final version of the book and make this point clear, because it's such an obvious blind spot for learners. So like this question here, you're saying like, hey Drew, your method is too slow because like I need to learn 30 to 40 new words a day. And it's like, okay, how would you start doing that already? Like, let's say you're like, what exactly are you doing to learn that vocabulary? Are you, I don't know, getting like word lists and, example sentences or something, and you put those on flashcards and then you review those again and again? That's what you're trying to do. Now, it is possible to kind of cram in this way. I'm just forcing a bunch of information into my head. But again, the traditional way people try to learn, we'll put the T method up here. We will call this time down here, and we'll put skill level or fluent level up here. Often, like, you start out faster like that, trying to learn a bunch of words like that, and every day, let's say you learn 10 new words or 30 or however many you need to learn. So you're going through a bunch of different examples like that. And usually what happens is you're not actually developing more fluency because you don't really know those words very well. So you're trying to memorize a lot, and I described this earlier in this video, but I've also talked about it in many other videos. But what's happening here is, yes, like you're starting pretty quickly, like, okay, we'll start our lesson and know a bunch of words, but you don't really know them very well. So maybe you do, I mean, it's possible, but typically for people like you're learning, depending on how you're learning that, you don't know the vocabulary very well. And often this keeps you on a plateau here where you continue to add more vocabulary. And you might even notice a little bit of improvement over time, but often it's not really helping people very much, learning in this way. So the opposite of that is what I actually recommend. We'll draw the same thing over here. So we got the skill level, like ability to communicate, and then we got time down here. So you're correct that it certainly seems like I'm moving a bit slower at first. So if we were to put this graph on top of that one, it looks like that. So we're starting off here, like I gave the example earlier in this video about how, we learned that, the ninja example, who had that on their bingo card or whatever. Now, focusing on that particular expression, you might think it's like, oh wow, I only learned one thing. That's so slow, Drew. Why don't you hurry up and teach me some more vocabulary? But if you really focus on that and actually understand it, there are quite a few different things you can take from that. Like, here's an example of the bingo card. What does that mean? Understanding that culturally and focusing on different pieces is not really just one thing. And this is, again, the idea of understanding something well reveals a whole bunch of other things that you probably would not learn by learning this way. Anyway, so what happens is the same thing. It seems like it's starting more slowly, but because you can remember your vocabulary better and you can easily connect new information with that vocabulary, your progress becomes a lot faster. So over time, you overtake these learners that are continuing to try to learn as much as they can, but they don't really know the vocabulary very well. And again, we're trying to learn even faster than a native. So a native would be their trajectory is more like this. If you think about a child learning, so they're much slower, and obviously they have time when they can't even speak yet. So they're getting lots of information, but we can be much more efficient with how we learn. So it is possible to become fluent this way and actually over time learn many more words because you're getting whole stories or things like that can help you learn lots of useful vocabulary. And again, if your point is really to speak, then this is the thing to do. So if you just need to pass a test, go ahead and try to do whatever you're doing to learn a bunch of vocabulary. But what I'm describing here is both a way to learn the language quickly and build a vocabulary quickly. You will actually build a vocabulary that you can use. And I think a lot of people, like myself included, when I'm learning something, I actually want to be able to use it. I'm not just learning or collecting vocabulary to pass some test. So if you only need to learn something to pass a test and it doesn't really matter how well you speak, then do whatever you like, whatever is efficient for you. But the method I'm describing actually does get you fluent and help you learn a lot of vocabulary because you don't forget the words. So often you're going through this, and what happens is okay, now that word was from a week ago, and I can't remember it anymore. So as you're moving to new words, like this older stuff that you had, oh no, now what am I going to do with that? Because I don't remember it anymore. So if you can remember it, great. But I don't think I've ever met someone who learned this way and was a great speaker. Because they only learned that way. From only learning that way, I don't think I've ever, and again, there could be people like that, but I've just not personally met one. I've never met a great speaker, so someone who was talking with me in a conversation, I say, oh wow, how did you learn? And they say, well, this is what I did. Every day I memorized 30 new vocabulary words. So I've never ever heard of that, never. So again, it might be possible, and if you need to pass a test or something, go ahead. Just do whatever you have to do to memorize particular vocabulary. But if you're really trying to speak, that's how, that's the thing we're actually looking for. We really want to understand the vocabulary very well. Let's see. Tom, nice to see you there. Damn, I'm late. It's okay. You're just early for the replay. And Joffrey is French. Nice to see you there. Akash, nice to see you there. Good morning. Ganesh and Tom says, I think I would learn 30 new words here in Drew's class. Yeah, so like if my goal was to actually teach you a bunch of vocabulary, like I would structure it so that you're learning a bunch of things that are connected with each other, like I do in Fluent for Life. So that's where I'm actually taking things and showing you how they work and then giving you more examples of them, and you get that naturally varied review, and you also see how these things work in real communication. And so when you're learning that way, that's what actually helps you speak. So like it's not, again, I'm not saying this is like a bad thing, like you're a bad learner because you learn this way. Like it's just that it's less efficient over time if you want to speak. And a lot of people do this for years and don't realize why they're struggling with that. So I talk about this specific idea in the book. I do not have this chart, but maybe I will put something like that in there for a future version of it when I release the final one. But yeah, let's see here. And then Carl says, sometimes text-based examples for naturally varied review aren't enough. For example, a word like must, how should one learn words like that? Well, again, like for a specific example of a word like must, you're number one trying to focus on a particular example, and I mentioned this in the book as well. So if you take a word like, okay, I have to learn the word must, and I'm looking at it just by itself, unconnected to anything else like that, you can see how that would already be difficult for you to remember, because there's nothing magnetic about this. But remember where I'm talking about this in the book. The point is to, number one, connect a use of a word with a particular situation. So I want to think about like something I have to do. Like right now, I must breathe. Like if I stop breathing, I will die, or I will fall over, and then I will, maybe my body will naturally start breathing. But I must do that. All right. So that's one example where I'm thinking about something that like I have to do, and I'm connecting that with a clear situation, like I must, do something. All right. So I must drink water every day. I must. All right. Like if I don't drink water for a few days, I will die. So I must do that thing. All right. But again, in this particular example, like the thing to not do, like I gave the example earlier when I'm talking about the pieces of the language, if we take a word like could, and you begin with just a random word, like, okay, I need to learn the word could. Like, okay, where are you getting that from? What is that? Why are you trying to learn that word? What is it from? How do you connect that with something? Because the connections here, that's what makes that magnetic. So you actually remember it and you see how it's connected with other words. So if you just begin with a random word that has no connection to anything, then of course it's going to be difficult to remember. But if you put could in a particular situation, like, hey, could I borrow $1 from you? So that's the first time you hear it, and you think, oh, could, like that's interesting. Like in this situation, I'm using could for asking for something. And then maybe I hear more examples of this same kind of situation. So the situation is requesting something from someone else. So I'm not trying to learn the word could and all of the different examples of it. I'm trying to understand could connected with other things that it's actually, used with. So in a real situation. So could you say that again? Could you say that again? It's another request where I'm asking if someone is able to do something for me. Okay. So remember, don't make the job difficult for yourself. I know that, again, like students are focusing on particular pieces. They begin with just a random word like this, and then they're not thinking about how it's connected with the situation. It's really important that you understand that, because the word could mean many different things. That's another example of the use of could. It could rain today. it's kind of cloudy. It could rain. So that's another example. But what I'm not trying to do is say, hey guys, today we will begin with the word could, and I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of how you might use that. That would be a horrible way for me to teach you that, because you're not going to remember any of those things. It's exactly like this. Okay, here's one example of could, and another, and another, and another, and I'm giving you all these different things, and you're just not going to remember that. But if we begin with one thing, like an example of a particular thing, like, could I borrow $1? And then you're hearing lots of other examples of like, yeah, I could lend you $1. I could do that, And so as you hear those examples, that's where you become certain about a particular use of a word. All right? So it's not to just be like, I like master the word could as its own word just floating around in space. That word is connected with something. Okay? So I could do that. So focus on a particular thing, especially when you're thinking about something that could be a difficult, quote unquote, a difficult word like this. So another word like, and I give this example in the book also, is as. All right? So typically, Tom, you would say like, could I borrow $1 or something like that? I mean, you could grammatically ask someone like, could you borrow $1 from me? Like if I want them to, but typically like, could I lend you something? So if a friend of mine is asking for help and I say, oh, like, well, could I give you some help? Could I give you $1 or something like that to offer something? All right, so if we begin with a word like as, and it's just floating in space, like a word by itself, it doesn't actually mean anything. It only means something when connected with a situation. And it might be connected to multiple situations, and that's fine. But you focus on one word or one phrase connected with a situation, and then get many examples of that kind of situation. Focus on one thing at a time. As. I work as a teacher. This works as a writing implement. So there could be different ways I could describe it, but I'm talking about like something being for something else, like something being a tool or being used for a particular thing. All right? But that's how we would get trying to figure something like that out. So like for me learning Japanese, I might hear a new word, but I'm always like, okay, where does that word connect? When is that word used? It's not just an individual word like this, like not connected to anything. Everything is connected to some use in a situation. So you have to go to the situation, and like you can start by going from the word to the situation, and then you could go from the situation to the word to get more examples of things. But that's how you do it. All right, does that make sense? So, I mean, I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, I do explain a lot of this in the book already, and I go into more detail in chapter 6, but just so it's clear, the point is not to try to remember, and I say this specifically, don't try to take a word like as and learn every use of it. You focus on a particular thing and get a lot of examples until you feel confident about that use. And then learn more or learn something different or whatever. But again, you can see how it's important to focus on something until you understand it, until you feel certain, because if you do not, then what's the point? It will just be another word that you learn a little bit and then you forget and then you can't use it. Maybe you understand it when other people are talking with you, but you don't feel very confident when you're using it. And that's the key. So for the people who want to speak, and those are the people typically who get the book, those are people who want to understand the language. So Joffrey says, immerse yourself every day and speak now. Don't speak later. Don't wait to be perfect. Just speak. So Joffrey probably does not have my book, but if he did, he would know that I don't recommend this. And I explain why I don't recommend this in the book. And number one, the immersion idea, like I specifically talk about that. What is that? Chapter 4, I think. But I'm talking about how people often think they need to immerse themselves in things, but it just ends up giving them way too much information. It's much better to have a controlled flow of things that are actually understandable rather than just like, okay, I'm going to drop myself in a pool and hopefully I figure out how to swim. And again, speaking now, like speaking isn't really developing your fluency. It's really the interactions that you have with other people, and when they speak, that you understand new things. There is a little bit of practice that happens when you're communicating, but most of that improvement comes from you understanding other things. Let's see. But again, those are kind of typical ideas that a lot of people think, but a lot of people try doing those and are not successful. Let's see. I meant the difference between borrow and lend. It was also an example. So yes, if you're like borrowing something or lending something, it's just the direction that it's moving. So if I get some money from you, I'm borrowing money from you. You are lending money to me. I get what Tom is saying. It says, Dran, okay, borrow is connected with the word lend. Yes, well, again, like, and that's a different sense of connection, but yes, like, obviously, if you learn something like borrow, you would probably learn another word like lend in a similar situation. But there are lots of different connections like this that you can make, but the connections are important. Right. Let's see. Bishy? Yes, it makes sense. Jaffa says exact. Speak is the first step. Yeah, so again, like this is the exact opposite that I recommend. So if it's working for you, like if you think speaking first is working for you, and you're becoming a better, more confident speaker as a result of that, then good. But I think a lot of people are not. And part of that is because they think if they can't speak, then they can't improve. But the truth is you actually develop first, you develop your fluency and learn to make these connections so that when you do speak, you can express yourself fluently. So it's the exact opposite of what people typically recommend, and that's why I call the book The Strangest Fluency Secret. Dran says, I strongly recommend to get Fluent for Life. Glad to hear it. Provides a lot of naturally varied review for specific vocabulary. Yeah, so I specifically designed it that way. Again, discovering these things and seeing how I needed to get those examples as well. It will help you a lot. But yes, Carl, like you can send us an email if you think there are specific examples. But like, I mean, this example, like the one you're asking about for must, is the same thing I give for the example of as in the book. And download Frederick. All right. Now, Dran, like again, like the point of this book, just for Joffrey here. If you're already good at speaking, you probably don't need to watch language learning videos like this. Like you should, really just be watching like actual content for native speakers. That would probably be a better use of your time. But just so you understand what I'm doing in the book, most people assume, and this is actually something I talk about in chapter 7 of the book. So I got to do these things one at a time. But for the typical way that people think they're going to learn, they think speak to become fluent. But that often doesn't happen. And the reason it often doesn't happen is because, number one, maybe you don't have anyone to speak with. What are you going to do? Maybe you don't live around, English speakers or whatever. Or maybe you just don't have time. Or you're too nervous or whatever. There are lots of reasons why speaking first wouldn't get you fluent, or it would just be difficult to do. And so that was like a problem that happened for me. So I was living in Japan, and even when I did speak every day, it wasn't helping me become a more confident communicator. And I thought that's a really weird thing. Why is it that even if I do speak, I'm still not feeling more fluent? And this is an experience a lot of people have. And so again, the idea that you should speak to become fluent, it makes sense. It sounds like that's a reasonable thing to do because we typically think about like a skill, and this is something I had to think about a lot to really understand about why I was not getting fluent. And again, I talk about this in chapter 7. But this idea of speaking first and then becoming fluent is like, wait a minute. Speaking a language is not like playing the piano or practicing a golf swing or something like that. The point is not to practice something until you do it perfectly. And in this case, the reason it's not like that is because a regular conversation is unpredictable. And that unpredictability means we have to practice for language learning in a different way. So if I think like, okay, I'm going to speak and I'm going to get fluent, like what should I say? Like, what do I repeat? And even if I repeat something and practice saying something, what if natives say something different? What do you do? And again, it's a different situation than practicing a song on a piano where I'm practicing something and then, okay, here's the concert I'm practicing for, and I just practice and practice and practice and get really good at playing that song. But language learning doesn't work in that way, because you can practice a phrase and then people say something completely different. And then what do? You're stuck because you're like, wait a minute, the textbook doesn't sound like a real speaker. My English teacher in the classroom doesn't sound like natives in the real world. Okay? And so we discover that, okay, like there's got to be a better way to think about this. And like, it can't be just speaking, because that's quite like an inefficient way, unless I have people to talk with all the time, for me to learn. But instead, we can do the opposite, where we can get fluent and then speak when we actually have the opportunity to do so. So the fluency actually develops. Obviously it can develop from speaking, but typically fluency develops as you get lots of good, understandable examples of things. Until you feel certain about it, though, you probably won't want to speak. So again, even when people do have chances to speak, they don't, because they feel shy or they're worried about making mistakes or other problems like this that are just typical for most adults. And it makes sense. Like, you don't want to make mistakes in front of other people. Nobody wants to do that. And so it's much more difficult to, like, if I'm a teacher and I just tell my students, hey, like, just get out there and speak, like, force yourself to speak, you go out and don't worry about making mistakes and all that. It's just like, it's just kind of silly advice. It's not me actually showing people how to feel prepared and ready in conversations. It's just me, like, putting the pressure on students to try to speak before they're ready. So if you do feel like speaking, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's great if you can begin speaking. But for a lot of people, they can't speak because they're actually not fluent already. So it's the backwards, opposite, wrong way around than what we would typically expect. But it's because we don't actually practice for communication the way we would practice for something like, me practicing a karate punch or something like that. So it's a different situation. It's a different kind of skill because of the unpredictability of it. So that requires us to think about it in a new way. And that's why this alternative approach works. So I don't tell people that this is the only way to get fluent. I just say, this is what worked for me, and it's worked for a lot of my learners, and it's an alternative to the typical way where people are like, okay, I have to speak to become fluent, but what do I do if I can't speak? And even if they can speak, a lot of them are still not communicating fluently because they're not certain about the vocabulary or the grammar or the pronunciation or whatever else. Okay? So how you're learning makes a big deal in the actual way you improve. But if you realize, oh, like, that's interesting, I can actually know something really well before I talk about it. And in people's everyday lives, you do this all the time. You might watch some things on a movie or a TV show or the news or whatever, and you feel confident that you understand something, and then you have a conversation about it with some friends of yours. And you probably do this all the time. And again, like, it's people just have this, completely different view of how learning a second language should work. And it's true, but in the sense I discovered that it's more like we can actually do what natives are doing, but just in a much more efficient way. So if we understand what's happening, we actually become fluent so we can speak, instead of trying to speak to become fluent. Because really what's happening when you speak is you're trying to like learn things, especially from other people you're talking with. It's not really about training your ability to talk about stuff. Because that comes, like, you can imagine things in your head about how to make connections with various words or whatever. So you can get fluent first and then speak. Okay? So when people, again, like they think about practice, the things that I talk about in the book are the things that will actually help you practice so you speak. All right? So the practice comes first, and then the speaking, there's some practice that comes with that, just moving your mouth or whatever, things like that. But most of the improvement, the fluency, is really starting, if not developing almost entirely, from just understanding the language and feeling confident about it. That's how it works. All right. So if you want to do this, if you want to speak every day and try to get immersion, go ahead. But I'm telling you, like, it's probably going to be a not very efficient way of doing that. So the other approach is to do the opposite. We're trying to make sure we understand something and be able to use it really well. All right. Did I miss anyone else? All right, Duran says, Javri, how could you speak if you're not certain about what you say? Yeah, and again, like, that's another, like, a very basic idea that a lot of people feel when they're in a conversation and they don't know what to say, or they're not confident about it. And this is for native speakers as well. Like, if I don't know how to spell a word, then I'll think about using a different word. I'd switch to something else. Victor says, sometimes I'll is hard to hear from me and some contractions. All right, so that means you should get more examples of those specific contractions from a variety of speakers, just like I talk about in the book. So Duran says, as a learner in general, you have to be open with learning new things. Java says, thanks, perfect advice. Practices. Jolly Ray says, in China, no study environment. Speak or listen, what is the first time thing? Get the book. Really, honestly, get the book. So click on the link in the description below this video, and the book explains everything. So I've taken 20 years of me, like, trying to explain all these things and really coming down to a very simple way of helping people understand how it works. But you first understand that you don't have to speak in order to become fluent. The opposite can actually happen. So if you want to become fluent and you don't have anyone to speak with, so this is like a good example of, like, how do I learn? I don't have a practice environment. Like, what do you think YouTube is? YouTube is a good example, just like ChatGPT or any other examples of you being able to get the language before you even have to talk with anybody. So you can become fluent by just absorbing the language and understanding it by getting certain about things. So you can answer specific questions you have about language, even if you don't have anyone to speak with. All right, Duran says, Drew is teaching us how to learn a language as a native speaker, regardless of which language. Yes, that's true, but just understand that I'm making it so you're learning even more efficiently than a native, because this is not just about giving yourself lots of random input. You're being strategic with how you get that immersion. So you can think about it like strategic immersion, I guess, but that's a basic idea. Let's see. Metal says, sometimes depends. He would say depends on the abilities of each person. In my case, first I started to understand English, then I started to speak. And after that, I started to read, and now I'm trying to write. Yeah, it's the same thing. So for me also, like my writing of Japanese is not very good. I just don't spend enough time practicing doing it. My speaking is way better than my reading or my writing. So it's different from like a typical classroom learner. But again, like if I'm trying to learn particular skills, I should learn them in the most efficient way if I'm, especially if I want to feel confident when I speak. So Duran says best input equals how natives say it. Yes, so you want to get examples of that, but it's not necessarily the only thing. So if you think about Fluent for Life, like right now I could explain a phrase to you, and so you understand it a little bit more easily because I've helped you understand it, and then you hear other examples that are more difficult. So the order that you get these things is important, and you can make it easier for yourself. Like I even talk about this in the let's see, I don't have any Japanese examples of this, but in the book, I give examples of like Japanese characters that are easy to read and characters that are not easy to read, even if it's the same character. So again, like when a teacher is trying to help people do things, just like I'm teaching my own kids, I'm a bit slower and clearer at first until they understand something, and then I start speeding up. So I really want to make sure they understand things very well, and then we really help them understand the language by giving them more of those natural examples. So yes, it is a good idea to get those things, and this is not to say teachers are a bad thing, because they are, but making sure that we get those good examples is the key. All right, wow, I didn't think I would be talking this long. 99 minutes, oh my goodness. All right, anyway, hopefully people have enjoyed this video. But if you, again, like you can kind of understand why it's taken me a while to write this, because I've been trying to explain this stuff for 20 years in various ways. And I think it really took the book to explain this, because some people, like if you begin like Joffrey thinking that like you have to speak in order to learn, then like, that's going to cause a lot of trouble for you. But if you're open to the idea of maybe there's a different way to approach fluency, and that's why like I had thought about a cover for the book, which I just made like a quick cover that you see for the book now. I may change that later, but it's kind of like climbing a mountain, and there are two different ways to get up there. And one way is like an escalator that you just ride on it up to the top, and the other is a kind of traditional way where you got all this, difficult stuff, and a lot of people are dying along the way. But this is an example of how we can get to fluency much easier. So there are just two different paths that will get you there. But again, and you're right about concentration, though. Concentration is important. This is what I talk about. I just call it focus in the book. But making sure you really understand things well, obviously, is the key to being able to use them well. What is the meaning of absurdity of life? Yeah. I don't know what that's referring to, but my voice is already too far gone to talk about philosophy right now. But yes, everybody I think is getting the idea. But if you'd like to learn more, you can click on the link in the description below this video to get the book. If you have, yeah, I'm losing my voice. If you have not gotten it already, Chapter 6 will be released soon. I'm going through the last pieces of that, but I'm excited to get that out and to show people how this all works together. Have a far gone. Yeah, it's too far gone. Now I'm losing my voice. Anyway, thank you for being here with me. Click on the link in the description if you'd like to learn more and understand this new way that I'm talking about learning. And I'll see you in the next video. And look forward to the new version, the new chapter coming out. Joffrey, you take care over there. You do well. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.